Hey, everybody, welcome to Radio 5G. It's Michael Henry Dunn with my good friend and co-host Nancy L. Hopkins. Good morning, Nancy. How's it going out there in Florida?
It's going. I looked outside and the sun's up, so that's good.
Oh, wow. The sun is not practicing social distancing with our planet. What a relief.
Oh, thank God.
Yeah. Okay, well, there is so much, it's curious to me when I look back on when we started this more than a year ago now, which is kind of amazing. And as Nancy has shared, she was pretty skeptical in the beginning that we'd really be able to make any progress in waking people up. And we've both been amazed at how quickly the movement to wake people up to the dangers of 5G ramped up. And now you've got this two-pronged thing happening where, because of what we're going to euphemistically refer to as the infection, I mean, it's bad enough we're a wake up to 5G movement here in terms of getting censored, for using now forbidden terms. But now we can't even refer to the infection and 5G in the same sentence without risking getting dinged or banned by Papa YouTube. Anyway, that now that we have the infection to deal with, that, the correlations between 5G and the infection have become like the absolute hot button. Do not mention, don't dare, this is the truth that dare not speak its name, is what we're coming to. But the evidence is piling up so compellingly that, again, it's like whack-a-mole. They can't shut down all of the truth spots where all of this is coming out all at the same time. And the main thing we'd like to be able to share with everybody today is there's a couple of really irrefutable pieces of truth that are on the table now for everybody to look at, and it's coming from the experts. It's not coming from the fringe folk. It's coming from the experts. And we're going to look at the information from one of the leading epidemiological statisticians in the world. And yeah, I had to practice all morning to be able to say epidemiological statistician without stumbling. From Stanford University, Dr. John Ioannidis, who in an interview with Fox News a couple of days ago stated that the information is now available, the data is now available to make an accurate estimate of what the mortality rate for the infection actually is. And it turns out to be 0.01%, which is far lower than typical flu, let alone the 4% or so that they were basing the earlier projections of millions of deaths. Then we have, on the other side, we've got horrific stories out of New York City from frontline doctors who are looking at something that is killing people really fast and that doesn't seem to answer to what they've been led to expect from a virus-related pneumonia. And we're looking at frontline MDs describing the symptoms of oxygen deprivation that just happened to accompany exposure to 60 gigahertz microwave radiation, just, by coincidence in a 5G densification locale, which would be New York City and would be Wuhan, China, and would be northern Italy. At a 0.01% mortality rate in terms of hundreds of thousands of infections of exposure that just went right through the population virtually unnoticed because of asymptomatic carriers. And again, social distancing, wash your hands, wear gloves and masks. It's all good. Follow all those recommendations. We're being good boys and girls here on Radio 5G. But anyway, we are going to share with you, from both sides of the spectrum and start to explore, okay, What does it mean that there's a 0.01% mortality rate? And what does it mean that people are dropping like flies in New York City from something very strange? That's what we are going to dare to explore here on Radio 5G. So you ready to roll there, Nancy, with what we have from New York?
Okay, you just gave this to me. Doctors face troubling questions. Are they treating coronavirus correctly? New York Times News. So that's the one we're going to play now at 7 minutes, yes?
Right. Yeah.
And do either of us know what we're playing?
There is that faint hint of doubt. I'm sure our listeners can hear in my voice when I go, yeah, right. Nancy, play that. That'll be good. Jeez, I hope it's the right one. No, right. Actually, it's the same guy. I mean, there's a different one from this same doctor. And because this is from New York Times News, because that's mainstream, that's going to be, it's not going to be covering, the full story that we had before on this. I do have, let me pull it up just to make sure we are giving people, what's being shared elsewhere. Pulling it up. Okay. All right. It'll probably take me a minute. Why don't we go ahead with this, because it does. The question that is being addressed here in this video that we're probably going to share with you in just a minute here is specifically, there's the young doctor who went public with his statement that what they're seeing in New York does not match the expectation of a viral pneumonia that is what this is supposed to be. Acute respiratory distress syndrome, ARDS. That it is not turning out to be a good idea to put people on ventilators, but they're facing this great dilemma. What do you do when you have sudden oxygen deprivation like this? But a ventilator turns out to put even more stress on oxygen absorption. So let's go ahead with this. It's useful information, and in the meantime, I will be looking to make sure we have the additional one, and we'll roll from there. How does that sound?
This disease has challenged everything that we believed was right 6 weeks ago.
It's different than anything we've seen before, and maybe the way we've taken care of things is not the right way of doing it.
There is a lively and healthy debate that I think is a good debate about what the right thing to do here is.
I'm concerned that if we continue on the path that we're on, that hundreds of thousands of lives and lungs may be at risk.
It's actually kind of vital that we not deviate from those treatment protocols, because we know that they reduce mortality.
If you ask physicians a month and a half ago, hey, someone comes in breathing 40 times a minute,
low oxygen levels,
Somebody who has an O2 sat in the 80s,
they will tire out within a few hours. So what's your next step?
Before COVID-19, I would recommend putting you on a breathing machine.
I would have rushed to intubate.
Because that was probably the right thing to do.
I know when to put in a breathing tube. I've worked long enough, and I've worked enough places and with enough people. But in this disease, it is extremely confusing. It just doesn't make sense. This guy stocked up for the apocalypse like most people. Now I just can't believe that I would thought that I'd somehow be home to make all my frozen food, but on a normal day in an ICU, you have very sick patients. Patients are dying, but this is just different. It's just, you have a disease we don't understand that is very deadly, with patients that are scared and staff that are scared. And on top of that, it does not appear that we have a good treatment strategy other than a ventilator. And we're not sure when to put a breathing tube in. The crux of it is we don't want to put a breathing tube in to someone who doesn't need it, knowing that there's a 70% chance they'll die. And then we don't want to not put it in to someone who would need it too late. You go to the ER and there's 40 people that need oxygen, and they all look terrible, but they can all talk to you.
And no apparent distress whatsoever.
And then you get them on a monitor and you look up and you see this oxygen saturation of 45 or 50%.
And I'm telling myself, this is impossible. This is not possible. How can this be?
It's just not compatible with life to have an oxygen saturation that low.
This is strange. It's out of a horror movie.
I've been unable to sleep because I'm trying to wrap my head around this. This goes against anything I've ever believed.
The paradigm of ARDS is not matching with the patients that I'm seeing. So it's like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole.
At the core of the core of the core, it is just what disease are we treating, And are we treating something that is naturally ARDS or are we not?
Okay, I've stopped it because it's got a lot of words on here that people aren't going to know, but I think it's important. So I've stopped the video because I'm going to read to you what it is it says on the video. They're talking about this doctor that just started talking. His name is Gadonian, wrote in an editorial examining 150 coronavirus patients in Italy and found two distinct groups. All right, let's see. There's 20 to 30% where patients had stiff, heavy lungs, fitting the ARD profile. 50% of the patients thin and unbelievably different that does not.
The type L cannot be treated as a classical ARDS. It's not a classical ARDS. You cannot do the same protocol for everybody. If they come and you don't have an idea if the patient is type L or type H, you probably do some disaster in 50% of the population.
Ioannidis says ARDS treatment strategies will do more harm than good for most
So what he is saying
patients.
is that we just have to be gentle. People will need a ventilator, and those that do need as high oxygen as possible, as little pressure as possible in order to buy time until this demon virus stops.
But many doctors take issue with his broader and
these patients have ARDS. I think the editorial has both been misinterpreted, and I think people have misunderstood that it's just that. It's an editorial, it's not a study, and it's not a trial. I don't doubt that people have seen some cases with some terrifyingly low oxygen numbers. On average, they're as sick as prior cohorts with ARDS.
I just think it's important to say that it's not a settled question. Every hospital in the world is probably solving this problem slightly differently.
We're using an early intubation strategy here, and of our first 66 patients, already a third of them have been extubated. I'm arguing for evidence-based medicine, which is something that we all purported to agree with before this outbreak hit. We have large randomized controlled trials. The patients in those trials had met the same diagnostic criteria that our current patients meet. We should apply the results of the trials.
But with lives on the line, many doctors say they are trying alternative treatments.
Today, we do not rush to intubate. Intubation has become the last resort, and the protocol, once they're intubated, has changed drastically.
So within the last 2 weeks, I think what has been unacceptable has become very acceptable. Some of these patients don't need to be intubated. You watch them carefully, you make sure their oxygenation is adequate, and they can recover.
I'm not saying we don't need ventilators, but perhaps we need to think about how we're using them. If somebody, and preferably people that are not taking care of patients every day, needs to look at the disease and figure out how we can treat it better.
The truth will come out eventually. In the meantime, the question is what do we do till that happens? And yes, I'm nervous. I'm scared every day when I go into work. But I'm just trying to do the best I can.
Okay, there. Doctors disagreeing with one another. Fairly amazing. I'm going to unmute Michael. Michael, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so the point, for us comes back to the question of, this is just, me as a layperson going on what I'm hearing, whether these oxygen deprivation symptoms are matching what would happen from from exposure to 60 gigahertz of microwave radiation. And, we've got some pretty powerful evidence that's been brought forward, for example, by Dana Ashley. Are you familiar with her work? Nancy? Hello?
Yeah, I had also, yes, of course I am. Yes, she's very good.
Yeah. Okay.
We played the doctor that, and boy, I'll tell you, I wish you could see. We'll put the link down in the, on YouTube. But you should see the look on this one doctor, the one that we played last week, because Ashley had put it together, and she's the one that said, if you've got oxygen deprivation, well, she's not the one that said it. It was actually Mark Steele that started it, because he could see the breakdown in the molecular configuration of a molecule of oxygen to a point that it can't be uptaken into the blood. And he told us that months and months and months ago. And now this doctor is describing what we would have expected to see if Mark was right. And Ashley is now, gone out, and she's found the same thing. She's got evidence, and she talked about it in that particular video, where this doctor, the last guy that was talking there, I forget what his name is, but he's very young, but oh my God, from the first time we saw him after 10 days of being there, he's probably been there close to 20 days now, he is really ragged. And so that these doctors, the ones that are right there fighting, they don't know, and they are terrified. You can see it in the way that they're talking to us. But if you understand 5G and what Mark had described happening, that's what's happening. And if you look at the statistics of New York compared to every place else, why is New York got such a high death rate? Well, if it's getting a high death rate, it's something more than what they're saying it is, just like the doctors are saying. And we know for a fact that there is a heavy population of 5G antennas throughout New York City. And God, I don't even know how powerful a situation they could be living in. And when they say that if you give them enough oxygen to get them through that depletion thing, that they, without putting the respirator on, they may be able to recover. Their recovery rates are a little higher. But that would make sense if you're talking about that the air they're trying to breathe is actually depleted with oxygen. It's not depleted. It's a different form of oxygen that their bodies can't take in. Okay? So if you got that situation and you find that, wow, they're recovering, well, there's anecdotal, again, information of people in Wuhan who would be walking down the street and suddenly start gasping for air and virtually drop to the ground and die of suffocation. These are reports that were coming out before, everything else started hitting. And, we're looking at that and we're going like, well, could they have walked into an area where you got one antenna and, maybe 5 antennas that are focusing on this one particular area, and you've got somebody that's not breathing really well to begin with, and they walk through this dead zone of oxygen, boom. When the doctors are saying, well, we've got to have data, we've got to have scientific data, you don't have time to get the scientific data. You've got to work on what people are seeing right now. This is what's happening. I do this, they live. I do this, they die. Let's not do the things that are killing them. You've just got to work with what you got there. So it's not a good scene, but from a standpoint of being somebody who's been talking about 5G and what the potential of it, to me, this is just proving our point. Because if you go and you do, and sooner or later, somebody's going to be I'm sure it's out there now, putting it together. You got the 5G. This is in New York. New York is got a big death sentence, a lot of dead people there. But you've also got an area that was, congested and polluted, and So is that the difference between New York and California? They got a lot of 5G. Why did the 5G didn't disappear? I don't think, or maybe they turned it down for all I know. Maybe because again, we've got 15,000, maybe 20,000 satellites above us now that is supposed to be putting a 5G signal. Is that what's causing it? Was that the very last amount of energy that it took to throw everything into skew? I don't know.
Yeah, another thing that I'm hearing, like I've had some social media conversations with people pointing out the correlation between the deaths and high densification of Wi-Fi, and particularly 5G. And they say, yeah, okay, but what about the mortality pattern in places that do not have a concentration of 5G? And I'm not seeing where they're getting that data. This is being used to refute the whole connection between the infection and 5G. Excuse me. And one factor that may be involved that comes to mind for me is, as we know, medical centers are being targeted as places for early rollout of 5G. And isn't it wonderful? We heard all about how, the wonderful telecom companies decided to rush a whole 5G array to Wuhan to help with the pandemic. Well, great. So this is another factor that's going out there, that's adding to the confusion that make people think, oh, okay, yeah, it's just those, it's conspiracy theorists, people cherry picking the evidence that supports their favorite conspiracy theory while ignoring the factors that counter it. There's other patterns in other areas that don't have 5G concentrations that are showing the same thing. Well, I haven't seen that information. This is the fog of info war, we might call it, that is designed to induce a state of such confusion that people just, oh, geez, I don't know what the hell to believe anymore. Heck with it. I'm just going back to binge watching Netflix on my couch. But I think you're right. It is coming clear. I don't know whether the low orbit satellite network has reached a place where they are actually able to, interact with 5G on the ground to be able to induce these kind of symptoms. That was something that I was really never quite clear on, because as you know, in the beginning, we were sharing with people, hey, look at what's happening in your neighborhood. These aren't like the old 3G and 4G telecom towers that can be a mile apart. These have got to be 300 to 500 feet. And so they're going to be, behind your home, in your schools, in your office buildings. They're going to be everywhere because they need to be short distances. And then there's the story out of Gateshead in England, where our friend Mark Steele, has been pulling the units. When he didn't pull them, one was tossed to him by a ticked off installation guy in the LED street lamps that are being surreptitiously equipped with 5G capacity and showing, immediate epidemiological consequences in Gateshead around things like tumors, suicidal ideation in teenagers, not just ideation, a rise in suicide rates, and a lot of other jumps in medical statistics out of Gateshead. So does the satellite network, how that actually interacts, with the networks on the ground, I confess I was never 100% clear on. And hey, I'm a layman. I'm a spokesperson here. My job in sharing this information with you folks listening, is to be able to have a sufficient grasp of it to convey the gist of it to you so that we can have a meaningful discussion based on solid sources of information. And this is one that I, just frankly, feel a little unsure about. What's your take on that, Nancy, in terms of the network the low-level satellite network, which was supposed to be, ongoingly launched, going for 15 to 20,000 of these low-orbit satellites. I mean, there's a total of 1,600 now, so this is just a huge exponential increase. Can you speak to that?
Not really, and I don't know that it's specifically important for our discussion, because you brought up the concept that, well, people are dying in areas where there's no 5G. Now, that's not necessarily true, because it's coming out all over the place that, there was a whistleblower at the CDC, Center for Disease Control, CDC, that said that they were manipulating the database to make anything that. All right, if you have COD and you come into a hospital, they're going to automatically call you a COVID patient, and should you die, you will have died of COVID, not of COD. This has been, doctors are saying, they're telling us to put COD. So in Italy, they reassessed their own data, and 50% of the deaths attributed to the flu are not now natural, other causes. They might have had the flu, but the other causes. So the statistics are not going to be able to be they're not going to prove that these people didn't die of COVID in an area that didn't have 5G. Am I making myself clear? I'm not sure I am.
You lost me a little bit on COD.
Okay,
what is that?
It's a respiratory problem. It's a disease of the lungs. Okay, so if you go into a hospital because you're having problems, they're going to give you that reading whether you have it or not, because the doctors are being told to do this. The CDC just had a whistleblower said everything is this the virus thing, and they're skewing, so they already know that the database of deaths and who got it and who didn't throw them out. They haven't been kept right. They're no good to you. You don't know. It comes back to not knowing because the database is so polluted. That's absolutely, that's all over the place. More and more people are saying yes. I'm not even going to, let's just assume that's a truism, that we don't know what the facts are. But we do know some other facts. And, first off, I did a recording of Dr. Jennifer Daniels, who is somebody that was extremely successful as a human being and as a doctor. She went to Harvard. She went to some of the best schools in the world. She had her own practice. She went to very good residency. She went to very good hospitals. And I said to her, look, there's information coming from certified doctors saying that all of what medicine tells us about viruses is just absolutely bonkers, and that a virus is not something alive. I understood viruses to be sort of like a bacteria, in that it was microscopic and that it could do the same things that a bacteria could do. Bacteria, you get it, you can get sick. Viruses, you get it, you can get sick. Well, it turns out that a good portion of these doctors that were coming out were saying you can't get sick from a virus. It's not alive and it's not dead. It's not something that is alive or dead. It's what they're calling a solvent, and that it is a byproduct of cells under stress that are detoxifying, and then you see the viruses start to enter the bloodstream. The viruses isn't causing the problem of being sick from detoxification. It's a symptom of detoxification. So I said to Dr. Daniels, I said, what's the story here? And she was like, you don't catch anything from something that never was alive. Viruses are not alive. You're not catching anything from viruses. And she goes on to absolutely blow my mind regarding medicine. The show that I did is a 2-hour show, and I'm going to put it up. I'm not even sure where, but I'm going to call it Interview with a Doctor, because she just she doesn't even live in the United States because she won't survive here. She doesn't even tell you where she lives, where she's at. But the information that she just confirmed that there is no virus. So, what I'd like to do, with your permission here, is to play a short tape from somebody who, and I can't tell you exactly who because it's a Crow House, Max Egan's Crow House. I got it from there, but I couldn't find it last night. Where is it? And I couldn't find my notes on the actual URL on it. So it's just this guy that's going to tell you what he thinks about catching a virus. And if you don't mind doing that, we can do that. It's not telling me how much time it is. So, you good with that, Michael?
Yeah, go for it. And, we'll cut it off if it goes too long. I got some other good information to share, too, when we get to it.
Yeah, let's just get this idea in our head that maybe what we're talking about with this virus stuff is all bonkers to begin with. And why?
Announcement from the WA Police Force. We would like to remind everyone in the surrounding area to ensure they are social distancing. Social distancing is critical to help limit the risk of COVID-19 spreading around the community. Please ensure you are 1.5 metres away from others. Thank you. Your actions are saving lives. For further information around social distancing, please visit www.wa.gov.au.
Hey, I've had quite a few questions over the last few weeks, so I'm making this for my friends to clear a few things up. First and foremost, something you should know, you cannot catch a virus. And why can't you catch a virus? Because it's impossible. So why is it impossible to catch a virus?
Question.
A virus is alive. Is a virus a living thing?
No.
So how is it that people think that you can catch something that is not alive?
Everybody knows you never go full retard.
Now, I know a lot of people are genuinely concerned, so that's why I'm making this, to hopefully cure some of the unnecessary fear and stress. And if you are feeling that, it's because you're causing it for yourself. And just so you don't think I'm sitting here making stuff up, I'll quickly tell you my background so you know how and why I'm telling you these things. I was one of those kids that could read and write before I even started school. I knew my 1 to 12 times table before other kids even knew how to open a book. I won academic scholarships at 2 expensive private schools. I did 6 years of science, which included medicine. I did 6 years of natural health and medicine. And I spent 3 years solely looking into the nature of viruses, bacteria, protozoans, fungus and parasites. And as a practitioner, I treated myself and a number of other people successfully long-term for conditions of the same. And when I did my last IQ and aptitude test, I was taken into a separate room and I was interrogated to see if I cheated. And more than anything, unlike Google and Facebook, I don't have vested financial interest dictating what I can say, and I don't have shares in vaccine companies. So what is a virus anyway? Well, a virus is nothing more than a solvent, and these solvents are created within the cells of the body. This is why you cannot catch a virus. Viruses are created cellularly. Now, the body can create hundreds of thousands of different viruses at any time. So why does a cell need to create a virus or a solvent? It's created in response to the built-up toxicity that we have in our bodies. So how does a cell become toxic? Well, a lot of people have spent a number of years putting shit in their minds and shit in their body. A lot of people think that it's just totally fine to eat supermarket food, you microwave it, just get flu shots injected into you every year, just drink your tap water. People that go after organic food are tinfoil hat wearing boogers. The thing is that nature doesn't care what you believe. You can believe that any of those things are true, but nature doesn't care what you believe. So a lot of people have asked me, what is a flu? Well, a flu is a viral detoxification or a cleansing. A cold, on the other hand, is mostly bacterial. And for the most part, what needs cleaning out of the cells are environmental toxins such as heavy metals, plastics, any kind of environmental industrial pollutants, the chemicals that you use in your home to clean things with, things you put in your body, and so on and so forth. Now, a virus does not attack cell tissue. What happens is that as a virus, which is a solvent, breaks down the toxic residue within a cell, it creates essentially a toxic waste. So that's why you'll feel shitty if you've got a virus viral infection. And what can happen is if there's a lot of shit in your cells, you're going to create a lot of toxic waste as that virus breaks it down. So what happens is that if there's too much of it, it can actually cause cell damage, and in extreme cases, it can cause cell death. But millions of people are dying, and you can catch some bat flu off of a counter or by being around your friend. Virus is specific to specific cells in the body. So somebody with hepatitis, for example, which affects the liver, does that affect the heart? Do they have lung problems? Do they have brain or gonad problems? Likewise, a virus that attacks the lungs will not affect the kidneys. It's because the virus is specific to specific cells in the body. So because a virus is not transmissible within your own body, it should make sense that a virus is not transmissible between people. So how is it that a number of people can get a virus at the same time? If it is created within the cells, how is it that a lot of people can get it at the same time? Well, if somebody at home has a cold, or somebody at work or at your sporting club, does everybody in that place get a cold? You know that the answer is no, despite the fact that a bacterial infection can be contagious. And why can a bacterial or a fungal infection be contagious? Because they are living things. A virus, remember, is not a living thing. So how is it that a number of people can get a virus at the same time? There is an intelligence that runs through all of life. It's why seeds know when to germinate. It's why animals know when to mate or to hibernate or to come out of hibernation. So the body knows when it's a good time to undergo a cleaning. And it knows when it's a good time from the environment and climatic conditions. This is why a number of people in the same area can undergo a viral detoxification. But again, does everybody get a viral detoxification at the same time? You already know that the answer is no. So why is that? Well, they may have already undergone a recent cleansing. They may just be very healthy people, and they're always watching the way they eat, the way they think, the way they move, the way they sleep. The intelligence that runs through all of life means that that body knows that it does not have to undergo a viral detoxification at that point in time. Well, I can't condense more than 10 years of experience into a short video. Hopefully that's enough to show you why you cannot catch a virus.
But I thought that it's an important message to hear. You know, he was the one that put it out there that sort of like, I understood what he was saying better than some of the other people that were trying to tell me that a virus is dead, never lived. You know?
Yeah, and you do still hear people saying, hey, well, you know, the virus lives for 72 hours on surfaces. It lives for, you know, this much here and that much there. And, you know, it's maybe just, you know, a mode of expression. But to remind us that a virus doesn't live in the first place is, you know, is a useful piece of information.
Well, it gives you a deeper appreciation for the delusion that they've created.
Right, exactly.
The basic science, what you're talking about, basic science, we're getting two stories. And, you know, which one do you believe? Well, you got to kind of look at the rest of the, you know, the game board. And there are too many things out there saying that, you know, this is completely fabricated.
Yeah. Well, there's also the point he brought up, and I've just backed it up with a link that I've shared here and that hopefully we can put on the YouTube when it comes out, talking about, you know, what, 500,000 to 1 million deaths annually from the flu. And I was just on a social media conversation with a good friend of mine, very intelligent woman in Los Angeles, who was saying, hey, Michael, come on. I mean, we're looking at losing as many people as we lost in Vietnam, all, you know, in a single season here already from this. And flu season is usually thought of as what, November to May, something like that, big definition of flu season. Well, this is just off of our friends at the CDC. 80,000 people died of the flu in 2018 in the United States. Right now, we're at a little over 50,000 here in April that are being attributed to COVID. Since we've said it, we might as well keep saying it. And yet, there was no lockdown, there was no hysteria in 2018 with 80,000 deaths. Now, when we are quoting Dr. John Ioannidis, one of the foremost epidemiological statistics experts in the world, recently interviewed on Fox, saying that with the updated information, now the testing is is sufficient from around the world, and this isn't just the U.S. He's gathered this from all the most dependable data, and not all of it's totally dependable, but the best they can do is they're realizing the mortality rate from this is far lower than they had thought. 0.01%. He makes the point, you are taking the same risk that you take in driving 10 minutes to work in your car. It's 1 in 1,000. That's what 0.01% chance of dying is. And this is not, some fringe person. This is one of the most respected, credentialed, mainline Stanford University professor of medicine, epidemiology, etc., Dr. John Ioannidis. So, okay, I did the math. I did a rough estimate. There's 300 to 330 million people in the U.S. 0.01% of that is around 30,000. Okay, so how many of the deaths are being misattributed? We'll find out in the long run, hopefully. I mean, with hospitals getting an extra, $13,000 if they list a death as being COVID, it may take a while to get down to brass tacks as to what really is happening with these deaths. But then you match that up to what's happening in New York. Okay, obviously this is something very strange and scary and unprecedented in the experience of these MDs and frontline ICU people in New York. So you've got what, on the one hand, according to the leading epidemiologist, is a negligible mortality rate from the worldwide statistics that are pulling in. And then you've got this really weird acute respiratory distress syndrome, ARDS thing, that doctors have never seen anything like it going on that matches
let me just correct you on that. ARDS is actually the pneumonia factor. That's what they thought they were treating. What they're finding is not that.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that. Yeah, I remember that now. Thank you. So we've got this. I've shared it with you here on the chat, Nancy. Do we want to play this Fox interview with Dr. Ioannidis of Stanford? Can you pull that up for us? Was that a yes? Are we doing this, Nancy? I'm not hearing you.
Because I'm muted. Yes. Just give me a second here. Which one are we doing?
It's got the guy in the white jacket with the tie and the smile on the mustache.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, Dr. John Ioannidis, professor of medicine epidemiology at Stanford.
All right, we're just waiting here for the thing to load up. And, wow, this is Fox. Taking a while. Okay, here we go.
Welcome back, America. We have a tremendous guest, Dr. John Ioannidis. Welcome. You are co-director of the Meta Research Innovation Center at Stanford University, the Reinborg Chair in Disease Prevention, Professor of Medicine, of Health Research and Policy, of Biomedical Data Science, and of Statistics. You're one of the most cited medical researchers ever. Professor of Statistics at Stanford University. You're a member of the U.S. National Academy of Medicine. And in research that you conducted, and two others posted on April 8th, you concluded that, quote, based on the data until April 4 for the whole COVID-19 fatality season to date, the risk of dying from the coronavirus for a person 65 years old is equivalent to the risk of dying driving a distance of 9 to 415 miles by car per day. Now, I have been saying, and then I look at your research, that the numbers that were thrown around early on, models that were not really made available, data which I didn't comprehend, and maybe it's because it wasn't very solid, these huge numbers of millions of Americans were going to die, then hundreds of thousands of Americans were going to die. I could never find the real basis for these numbers, and the media kept pushing them, and they had charts on their monitors and on their screens. every day. Then I read your piece. It says, wait a minute, we don't have reliable data. Tell me what was in your mind when you wrote this piece, and tell me why you were right.
Thank you for the very kind invitation, Mark, and thank you for giving me an opportunity to try to answer these tough questions. I'm a person who's working with data, and I'm also trained in infectious diseases, so it was natural that when the COVID-19 pandemic evolved, it became a top priority for me to understand what was going on. And much like many other scientists, I started looking at what information do we have available and how solid is that evidence that is guiding decisions that have monumental impact on saving lives and also potentially harming lives because of the consequences of some of the measures. It became very obvious to me that the evidence that we had in the early phases of the pandemic was utterly unreliable. We had to base our decisions on whatever we had, and I think that we did the right thing to act decisively and urgently. However, many of the numbers that were circulating were based on how many patients we were seeing with symptoms who got tested, and then how many of those died. It was possible that there was just a tip of the iceberg, that many more people could have been infected, and actually they're never documented because they were never tested, so the denominator might have been much larger. The original figures that were circulating and the ones that were circulated by WHO suggested that 3.4% of those people who we diagnose, we give them a label of COVID-19, would die. And of course, this is astronomical risk of death. And early mathematical models built on these assumptions, or a little bit toned down assumptions, but still making astronomical predictions about tens of millions of people dying around the world, 50 million people, 2.5 million people in the U.S., which of course would be a catastrophe that we had never witnessed before. However, that's not true. It is completely off. It is just an astronomical error. And over the last several weeks, we have started accumulating data that show that indeed there is an iceberg, and we were just seeing the tip of the iceberg. There's far more people who are infected with this virus. The vast majority of them don't even realize that they have been infected. They are asymptomatic, they have no symptoms, or they have very mild symptoms that they would not even bother to do anything about. The best data that we have now suggests that it's not 1 out of 30 or 1 out of 100 people who get infected who will die. It's probably in the range of 1 in 1,000. And we also know that there are some types of people who are at much higher risk than others. Most of the population has minimal risk. It's in the range of dying while you're driving from home to work and back. However, very elderly individuals, people who have severe underlying diseases, in the hospital in particular, or in nursing homes, there are settings and people who are at very high risk. And these settings and these people we need to protect fiercely and do the best and save lives. However, the original expectation that we'd be seeing tens of millions of dying individuals, that's not happening.
Now, I'm not a mathematician. I'm a constitutional lawyer, and there's a big gap between the two. You say 1 in 1,000. You're saying well under 1%. Is that 1/10 of 1% of the population that actually has the virus will pass away as a result of the virus or in connection to the virus?
So this is also an open question, because for the data that we have a little bit more mature and detailed information, like Italy, that has already gone through the peak of their epidemic wave, we realize that 99% of people who die with this virus have other reasons as well to die. On average, they have close to 3 other reasons to die. On average, they're 80 years old with other comorbidities, as we say, and there's quite some debate on whether these people would have died anyhow, if not immediately, perhaps in a few days or a few weeks or a few months. In our country, we see a fairly similar picture. We see that people who are disadvantaged, poor people, creating even further inequality in the population through COVID-19 seem to be very hardly hit. we see that the age at death on average is a little bit lower compared to European countries, in the range of 73 or 74 years old. And we see again lots of comorbidities in people who die with COVID-19. It's very hard to say how many of these people would have died anyhow and how much is the direct contribution of the virus. These data are evolving, but if anything, they suggest that the burden of disease, as we call it, the number of person years lost, how many years of life are being lost, is much less than even what the number of deaths would suggest. This is not to minimize the problem. It is a serious problem, and we need to deal with it, and we need to protect these vulnerable individuals who are actually among those that our society probably has not helped in the past. So we need to do everything to protect them. But in the big picture, the risk is much, much, much lower compared to what we thought before.
I think you and a handful of other experts, Dr. Katz of Yale and so forth, and your team have developed a growing consensus, I think, among experts and certainly among the people. Take care of the vulnerable, but let the rest of us go free. That we have lives to live. We'll be careful. We can mitigate. We'll figure this out. But we have 22 million people now who are unemployed. 22 million. God knows what it's going to be next week and the week after that. And we have some politicians saying we're not going to open up our economies in our states until we have a vaccine, or we're not going to open up the economies in our states until every single case is resolved.
Okay, that's the end of the tape.
All right. Well, it doesn't get, much more credentialed and mainstream than Dr. Ioannidis of Stanford University in terms of this. And yet, okay, we're having to rely on Fox News for this. You're not seeing it on MSNBC. You're not seeing it in the headline treatment it deserves in the New York Times, Washington Post, etc. What folks on the right would refer to as deep state, mainstream, lamestream, etc. News. So, and yet the lockdown continues, and then we have to deal with. I mean, the puzzle for me. And I think for a lot of people, when they're trying to have conversations with friends and loved ones and coworkers about this and about the lockdown, and especially for what we're going to call the woke folk, who are more aware of what's going on in the world and in this country, are aware of the connection to 5G, are aware of the 60 gigahertz oxygen deprivation phenomenon that's occurring, and are aware of, what we're talking about is happening in New York City. It's reconciling these two things and saying, okay, so what's at play? And I just want to give you my little thumbnail sketch here about when people are asking me about this, I sure don't want to pretend like I've got the inside skinny, here's the real deal, Mike Dunn tells it like it is. Well, what I know is that it looks like chaos. Just like it does to most people I'm talking to. Okay, was it manufactured? Was it a bioweapon? Is it the Illuminati? Is it the Chinese? Is it the deep state and the Chinese? Is it the bad professor from Harvard who was arrested for being bribed by the Chinese and who helped design the bioweapons lab in Wuhan? The best that I can figure is that however this got started, that the factions whose agenda for years has called for controlling the human population, depopulating, increased surveillance, rolling back human rights, increasing surveillance, these agendas have been in place for a very long time. And that however this began, it is being taken advantage of by these factions, many of whom are competing with each other, and are probably trying to control whatever mechanism might exist out there for exacerbating what's going on, targeting certain groups, having it be genetically targeted, having it be economically targeted. It just, if you look at what's going on, this is a textbook opportunity for such factions to increase surveillance, increase censorship, roll back human rights, do mass, forced vaccinations, things that have been on their agenda for years. It's like, okay, whoever rolled this horror out, we're going to take advantage of it. And so all we can do here at Radio 5G is point out the evidence about the relationship of this oxygen deprivation, 60 gigahertz microwave radiation. We can point out the leading epidemiologist in the world coming out and saying, hey, folks, this is a 0.01% mortality rate, not millions of dying. It's not even a bad flu season. A bad flu season, 2018, CDC tells us 80,000 Americans died of the flu in 2018. No hysteria, no lockdown. Dr. Ioannidis is saying, well, this is working out statistically to 0.01%. That's like 40,000 or less. Well, we're already at 50,000 and counting. So clearly something else is going on. And eventually we'll find out what. So in the meantime, the best that we can do for you here is just track the emerging information, and also, as is part of our mission statement, take it to the higher level, take it to the level of consciousness, frequency, and vibration, take it to the level of spirit and divine intervention, remind us all we can work with the Shungite field, remind us all of things like, we had Reverend Maya join us a couple of weeks ago about some of the protocols that she's working with on a sacred science level to deactivate some of the dynamic associated with this that she's receiving. Again, that is subjective. That cannot be scientifically proven at this time. And yet, use your own discernment if you feel a resonance with it. We certainly think it's worth exploring. In the meantime, it's about hard science and sacred activism, trying to go, find a balance here. Is this making sense to you, Nancy?
Well, let's take a break. I want to play Barbara Manessa's coronavirus support music just because it's a very good vibration. But when we come back, let's take a look at some of the things that are happening that are even more profound.
I love profound.
Their whole story is falling apart. So I'm going to play 4 minutes. We'll be right back.
All right.
in love.
Just like fire. And we're back. I'm back. Michael, are you back?
I'm back.
Okay, we're back.
I am here, yeah. Okay, so we were going to get even more profound, right, Nancy?
Yes, we're going to get more profound. Let me pull up the playlist. Oh, right, I forgot what I was doing. Okay. Alrighty then. What this is going to be is, I'm looking at, okay, I think it's important to look at Fauci, because when you find out what he's been up to, this is going to put a whole different look at everything. And Fauci, for those that don't know, he's the director of one of the departments of the Institute of Health for the United States. And he's been there since like '84. So let's just listen to this one. This one's gonna, huh?
Okay, I got some really good news. The president is on it. $3.7 million transferred to the Wuhan laboratory by the National Institute of Health during the Obama administration under Fauci is now under investigation. The president just announced it. Take a look.
Thank you, Mr. President. U.S. intelligence is saying this week that the coronavirus likely came from a level 4 lab in Wuhan. There's also another report that the NIH, under the Obama administration in 2015, gave that lab $3.7 million in a grant. Why would the U.S. give a grant like that to China?
The Obama administration gave them a grant of $3.7 million. I've been hearing about that. And we've instructed that if any grants are going to that area, we're looking at it literally about an hour ago, and also early in the morning. We will end that grant very quickly, but it was granted quite a while ago. They were granted a substantial amount of money. We're going to look at it and take a look, but I understand it was a number of years ago, right?
So you are.
When did you hear the grant was made?
2015.
2015. Who was president then? I wonder.
So this is huge, huge news. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, we have a video on the channel right now that is going mega viral, okay? It's my interview with Dr. Buttar, and he talks about the $3.7 million, what that money did, and how Fauci got around the Department of Homeland Security order to stop doing testing on coronaviruses in the United States. Listen to this. What I think you're talking about is the moratorium that was placed, and then $3.7 million from the National Institute of Health was transferred to China so they could continue
this research, even though the moratorium, so they basically outsourced this research to China. Is this the same topic we're talking about here? This news is just breaking?
Yes, this is exactly right. So it goes back to 2014. The U.S. government decided, based upon certain virologists at that time, saying that, look, there's no justification for this kind of research. There's a potential for it to cause harm, cause a pandemic. So there's no justification for us to do this type of research. So the government passed a moratorium in 2014. Fauci approved budgets to be monies to be section for this type of research. So basically, and I'm getting really, every time I think about this, it gets me really flustered because I'm so angry that he basically broke the law. He more than broke the law. He created this entire cascade that we're seeing with the world shutdown was created by this initial aspect back in 2015. He broke the law. He went against government moratoriums. He took taxpayer money and he funded research that has now led to the COVID-19. In 2017, he was documented at Georgetown University saying that there will be a pandemic that this presidency will face, that this term will face. How did he know that in 2017 that something was going to happen in 2018, 19, or 2020? You can't predict the market from 3 days from today, what's going to happen. How did he know that there was going to be a pandemic? He stated the president of this president will face a pandemic. The exact quotes, I don't want to say the exact words. You guys have the video footage. My point is that
there is no question that there will be a challenge to the coming administration in the arena of infectious diseases, both chronic infectious diseases in the sense of already ongoing disease, and we have certainly a large burden of that. But also there will be a surprise outbreak. There will be a surprise outbreak. There will be a surprise outbreak.
When somebody starts making these type of statements, and then they were involved with the breaking of the law to fund the research that American taxpayers paid for, that then goes to Wuhan and now trying to create this diversion and say that it was China.
That was just a clip of the larger 45-minute interview. I will link to it down below. You need to see the full interview for the full perspective. But the good news is that Congressman Matt Gaetz is also onto this. Okay, he went on Tucker Carlson and just took China to task and talked about the money that you are paying with your taxpayer dollars to fund the Chinese labs that are creating these pandemics. Listen to this.
So at best, Americans are funding people who are lying to us, and at worst, we're funding people who we knew had problems handling pathogens, who then birthed a monster virus onto the world.
Follow the money. And it leads right back to Fauci and then right back to the National Institute of Health underneath the Barack Obama administration, friends. Okay? There you have it. How do we get here? Maybe we should ask Barack Obama. Maybe we should put Fauci on trial and ask him what's going on. How did that money go through? You know, he actually addressed the question about if the virus was man-made. And I'm going to show you the clip here. He was, the guy's never at a loss for words, but he knows he's under the microscope right now because the president's about to investigate that money and where it went, how it got there, and now he's sweating bullets. Watch this clip.
Ask Dr. Fauci, could you address these suggestions or concerns that this virus was somehow man-made, possibly came out of a laboratory in China? You studied this virus. What are the prospects of that?
There was a study recently that we can make available to you where a group of highly qualified evolutionary virologists looked at the sequences there and the sequences in bats as they evolve, and the mutations that it took to get to the point where it is now is totally consistent with a jump of a species from an animal to a human. So, I mean, the paper will be available. I don't have the authors right now, but we can make that available too.
So he's still maintaining that this thing was just jumping species or whatever he says. But we know that there were studies on coronavirus that were done in the United States. If there's anybody that knows, it's Fauci. He knows exactly what that thing is. Okay? because they were studying it here in the United States, and then they shipped it off to China when the DHS said stop. So I'm going to show you another clip here of Dr. Buttar again, and this time he takes it to the next level. And I think he's saying what a lot of people are thinking right now. Listen.
Is Fauci directly responsible for this pandemic because he maneuvered the money, he maneuvered around the moratorium, kept this chimeric research going in China? Is he directly responsible for not just the pandemic, but also the response that's killed the economy, put, 17 to 22 million people out of work? Is Fauci directly responsible?
I'm going to say this. I think that I've seen some petitions going around. I know Dr. Shiva said that Fauci should be fired. I think that's the nicest thing that could be done to Fauci. I think he should. He's a criminal. He's broken the law. He's going against the government. I mean, to me, that seems like it's a traitorous thing to do when the government has passed a regulation and he's at one of the highest levels in the NIH. He's got a directorship at the NIH, and then he breaks the law, he breaks the moratorium, and then funds research against something that could potentially cause harm throughout the entire world, and he's in collusion with the foreign government.
So now you have Fauci colluding with the foreign government during the Obama administration, funding coronavirus studies at a Wuhan lab with your money. Now, thankfully, I'm going to throw it back to the president here. Just earlier, just a couple hours ago, he said he's going to be taking a look at the money, and they got a lot of money in the National Institute of Health budget. A lot. He details how much money, and then he goes back and says, we're going to take a look at the $3.7 million that Fauci approved to send to China. Listen to this.
And NIH is giving away a lot of money. A lot of money. We give away for many years, they give away a lot of money. And some people complain and some people don't. Some people are extremely happy. So we're looking into that also. They're giving away approximately, as I understand it, recently more than $32 billion a year. $32 billion. And so we've been looking at that for a while, and we're going to be having some statements to be made about that. $32 billion a year. It's a lot of money, and we want to make sure it's being spent wisely, and we've been doing that, by the way, and we'll have some statements on that. And those are much bigger numbers than what we're talking about with national. If you look with our friends from wherever they come from, 500 million is a lot of money, but it's not a lot compared to the kind of money that we give out. I think over the years it's been averaging about $32 billion. $32 billion. So we've had our eye on that one for a while. We also talked about the lab in China where I guess $3.7 million was given some time ago, and we're looking at that very closely. Chief of Staff has that pretty much under control, but it's money that, too bad it got spent there. But that was spent, what year was that, Mark? It was 4 or 5 years ago.
Over the last 6 years.
6 years ago, approximately. So we're looking at that.
So I told you it's good news. This is a really good development. We're getting closer to accountability here, and that's where we want to be. Okay? Your taxpayer dollars being shipped off to China, creating the pandemic itself. It is unacceptable, and it is criminal.
Okay there.
All right. So, okay.
Pretty interesting to me. How convoluted this whole situation is. That I don't know. I just don't know. You shake your head about it. Now, I've got another tape here, and it's by another broadcaster, and it's that the National Institute of Health knew about chloroquine. That they knew that it would not. It sounds like that this thing will take care of almost everything viral. You want to hear that one?
Well, I'd actually like to roll a little bit with some conversation about what you just played.
Okay, go ahead.
And I'm interested, when you said, "Hey, let's get more profound." I mean, this is definitely interesting stuff. It's about the funding and the politics and all the rest of it. When we're trying to look at the big picture here, and I understand, like, for this guy, who's interviewing Dr. Bitar and tracking the money from Fauci to the Wuhan lab, and it sounds pretty clear from what the president was saying in the last day or so, that he says, okay, we're looking at that. We're looking at the 3.7 million. I mean, it's not like that is officially under investigation by the Justice Department. It's kind of being framed that way, like they're looking at it. Okay, great. I hope they look real closely at it. But, to demonize Fauci or to demonize Obama, this happened under Obama. Okay, sure. Yeah, it happened under Obama, who was, the usual puppet of what we'll call the dark factions, or what we'll call the corrupt financial elite. And one faction of the corrupt financial elite is fighting another faction of the corrupt financial elite. And nobody is going to be sitting at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, at least up until 2017, who was not a puppet of the corrupt financial elite. And they're all going nuts because now they don't have a puppet. They've got somebody they view as a loose cannon. But I just want to remind us, okay, me, I'm just totally over the red, blue, left, right, demonize this, demonize that situation. To stop at Fauci or to stop at Obama is to really miss the point in terms of an actual planetary shift here, in terms of actually focusing on principles rather than personalities, and rising above the right, left, red, blue, bogus circus, and seeing our way to, the real lever that can be pulled here, which, as we know, is consciousness, is frequency, is vibration. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents. See, I find it ironic how you hear the same thing I hear, and you get something that seems important to you, which I just didn't even, it didn't even cross my mind as being important. What I saw as profound is the fact that there are no borders. That what we're talking about is the United States people supporting financially the agenda of one man who might be working for himself, but unlikely, that's in collusion with another nation. You talk about them not understanding, not being connected. They're like a layer of existence that who would have imagined? Who would have imagined that somebody would have taken it upon themselves or under orders to disregard, and I'm not saying that he wasn't under orders. I'm saying that you can see a line of this octopus type of thing that is above us, that doesn't even take into consideration our existence, except like we might take the consideration, the existence of a cockroach. There is a profound difference in the way that these people go through existence, their own lives. They have a different version of reality totally than what we do. And the problem is that we can't understand where they're coming from because it's beyond what I'm talking about most human beings, consider real. We wouldn't even consider that this was going on. Why would we? It goes against everything that we know from the basics of, nation sovereignty.
These are truly people that think in terms of the globe as being theirs, and they don't give a crap about laws. They don't give a crap about the dangers it might pose to anybody. They take no responsibility for it. They're just like really weird people. And I hope they're not human, because really,
well, that would be too easy, wouldn't it? That would just be way too easy for us to say, oh, well, they're not human.
Yeah,
No,
that's the
they're
problem,
human.
is we have to address the fact that if they exist, well, what's wrong with humanity? What's this flaw in the human species that allows this completely divergent reality spectrum, where they see reality in a way different than we do?
Yeah. Well, I have a thought or two about that. Would you like to hear it?
Sure.
Okay. So, so this guy we've just listened to, he's saying, this man, Fauci, been spending our taxpayer money, giving it to a foreign nation to conduct research that's forbidden by the law. And, and that sounds like it's really quite possibly true. Should be investigated, should be prosecuted. Totally on board with that. But, if you're not looking at the bigger question that you're bringing up, Nancy, which is, okay, how are these people dealing in numbers of human lives in this totally callous fashion? How, we go back to, for our experience, you and me, growing up in the 20th century, the Nazis and the Holocaust, and, they were the reigning example of a genocidal kind of attitude like that. Well, how did Fauci get in place? Who put him there? What agenda was he completely lined up with that the people who put people like him in place said, yeah, this is the guy, and he's totally immersed as a researcher, as a virus guy, that's what he lives and breathes, research into viruses. And, okay, so what's the agenda of the people who are the puppeteers above the puppeteers in terms of the depopulation agenda, in terms of the mass vaccination agenda, in terms of the microchip agenda? So you've got a mid-level manager, essentially, is who Fauci is. Fine. He's committed crimes. If he has committed crimes, he should be prosecuted and punished. But let's not pretend that because we got rid of Fauci and we're talking, we're throwing dirt at Obama, that we've solved the problem. Because those guys are just mid-level management appointed by puppeteers above puppeteers. And if we're not addressing that, then we're not addressing, where actual change can take place. And if we're not addressing, as we know, the level of frequency and vibration and a shift in consciousness, it's all just window dressing, on the same old. And again, you bring up something, Nancy, that, I spent 5 years on, which is, if these people are not accountable, where does it end? If the human family cannot get its act together to uphold the rule of law, to have, an international court that respects national sovereignty, first and foremost, that is not just another, globalist fig leaf like the ICJ or the ICC. Hey, good jurists, hopefully of integrity, populating those courts, but they're essentially designed not to interfere with the powers that be, not to interfere with the system. They're never going to address these kind of crimes. Now, I spent 5 years focused on founding a new and enforceable International Court of Human Rights that would be based on, highest level due process, that would use existing levels of, fast track enforcement to attach assets. And, anyway, it was helpful. It pointed out a lot of things. It went south on the integrity level for me. But, this is what you and I talked about last week, I think, right? It was like, I had a conversation with a gentleman in Southeast Asia that I worked with, specifically about the sealed indictments. When are they going to roll out? We've been hearing about them for years now. Oh, you're working your way up from the lower level guys, trying to get them to turn state's evidence on the upper level guys. Great. okay, it's been going on way too long. 100,000 sealed indictments, where are they? Where's justice? Where's due process? Where's people in handcuffs? Where are these rescued children we hear about? You know, until it's that level of change, you know, you get some guy, and I give him credit, this guy we just listened to, for wanting to point out, you know, Fauci's links and this 3.7 million going to Wuhan. That's important. You know, I salute him for bringing this out. But I just keep going back to the big picture and saying, you know, we can't just be, you know, demonizing Fauci and Obama and pretending that we've solved it. We found the bad guys. It's a lot more profound than that. End of speech. Got any thoughts on that?
No.
Okay. All right. Well, then you have something you wanted to share.
Well, we've got another. You probably won't like this one either, but it's about the fact that they knew about how effective chloroquine could be, and it's just another piece of information that kind of makes you go, uh-huh. So, you know, let's just give it a whirl.
This is daily new cases, right, in the United States of America on a daily basis. Now, what I want to discuss is the timeline of these cases. As you can see, remember, this is not an accumulation. These are the daily. Every day they got more and more per day were being announced, okay? So let's be perfectly clear on the discussion that's happened in America and when decisions were made, okay? And I did this at the last second. This really just occurred to us. This is how we do it on the HighWire. We're putting together. So this could be a little bit prettier, but I think you're going to get the idea, and I might have to insert a couple of ideas. But let's get started, shall we? All right, starting on February 15th. Now, this is what Anthony Fauci was really having to address. On February 15th, Fauci had mentioned that this is minuscule, that the problem of coronavirus really is not that big, and therefore it's a minuscule problem, all right? He ended up being wrong. It's okay. Everybody gets it wrong sometimes, but that's February 15th. Well, the biggest story I think there was the top virologist in France, Didier Raoult, said this was on February 25th. He had a study going on in China, and he said, it is game over for the coronavirus. We have done studies with hydroxychloroquine, and we have had such an incredible success that I'm going to paraphrase here, but he basically said, not only is this a respiratory virus that we can treat, this is one of the easiest respiratory viruses we've ever had to treat. That happened on February 25th. Now, right here on March, I think it's 6th, Andrew Cuomo in New York prohibits the use of hydroxychloroquine in New York, a very odd choice after really the counterpart to Fauci in France is saying, game over. Cuomo is saying, I'm going to make it very difficult for you to use this as doctors. That's happening right here around March 5th. And then, all of a sudden, right around March 7th and 8th, Fauci now changes his tune. No longer is this a minuscule event. Now we can say that it's looking quite serious, okay? So it's quite serious as of March 7th, all right? And then here, Donald Trump, let's remember that right around March 16th, right? March 16th is right where we started, bringing in social distancing. And by, March 28th over here is when we would finally have the lockdown. But that's not my point. This is what they want to talk about. I want to talk about this. On March 20th, I believe it was, 19th and 20th, we have Donald Trump fighting the FDA and demanding that they give compassionate use for chloroquine, saying, I don't care that it's off-label. There's so much success around the world. As President of the United States, I want this made available. So he fights and achieves this. He gets the FDA to loosen up on hydroxychloroquine. We should be allowing this to be used on patients. So that's all the way here. And then right around March 22nd, we have Dr. Zelenko in New York that is saying, I've treated hundreds. It ended up over the next few days, he said, I treated 699 patients with this, with an over 90% success rate. All right? All of this happening, but look what's happening to our death rate. While all these conversations, Trump sees it coming. He opens up chloroquine. We have a guy and multiple doctors in here saying, huge success. Some of the clips we showed you, huge success. What? This is new cases. All right, these are new cases, right. These are new cases going up like this the entire time. While all of this is happening, we are marching towards a death rate of 33,000, right? We are now in the throes of it. Back here 2 weeks ago, we're announcing that we know the final peak is coming. And then all of a sudden here, all the way over here, this is when Fauci's NIH decides to start the first chloroquine study, is now at the peak. Once this thing is almost over and we're now discussing going back to work, and the New York Times is saying tens of thousands of people have died, this thing was horrible, this horrible death rate, what responsibility will be laid at the feet of Anthony Fauci for not listening all the way back here? Back here when Didier Raoult said, game over. On February 25th, Anthony Fauci waited till April 9th to start a trial on this product. I think that sounds outrageous. I believe this will go down in history as perhaps one of the most dangerous decisions ever made. And by the way, we're not just talking about hydroxychloroquine here. There are studies of, remdesivir. There are also studies where they're oxygenating blood because we're now seeing this as an oxygen issue, as we discussed last week. We also know that there are, some trials on using blood products that have already got the antibodies of people that were infected. But none of this is seeing $1 billion. We don't see 20,000, 100 studies going on here, putting $1 billion here. So these people won't be at risk, so that 33,000 people don't die. That didn't happen. And I think that's the biggest story of all of it. Is it possible that we were so blinded, that our health officials were so blinded by the beautiful dream of the vaccine unicorn that they didn't fund anything to stop this and treat it now? And I have one last thing to show you. Perhaps my most dramatic attempt to give you, really that inconvenient truth, which goes something like this. If you take this scale and you bring it all the way back and back and back and back, continuing back, what we find all the way back here in 2005, and let's be reasonable, if I really had the right lighting, I'd be out of this building and across the street compared to that graph right there, where Fauci waited over 8 weeks, or roughly 8 weeks, from the moment Didier Raoult says, game over, chloroquine works. Back in 2005, the NIH, where Anthony Fauci has worked since the 1980s, funded a hydroxychloroquine study that looked at its use on SARS coronavirus. This study right here. And if I read you the conclusion, it says, chloroquine is effective in preventing the spread of SARS-CoV in cell culture. Favorable inhibition of virus spread was observed when the cells were either treated with chloroquine prior to or after SARS-CoV infection. That's here.
Okay, so what he's saying there is that they already knew way beyond when it became, when the president mentioned it actually, that there was a way out of this. Now, it's just another piece of the puzzle regarding this Fauci's involvement. And I'm not, like I say, the guy was probably, he was certainly taking, maybe he's the kingpin, what do I know? But he's probably taking orders, and there is some kind of a very, knowledgeable group of people who have manipulated this entire thing. And I don't think Obama was just happened to be the president when they started this out. It is the deep state. And again, it goes back to the concept of we as human beings, we have to look at this. And you want to keep bringing it back to bringing them to justice. Well, before we can even get to the point of bringing them to justice, we have to understand and to try to make other people, comfortable with the concept that there is a very dark force out there working. I mean, it's the ultimate enemy that we hear about and see about in all these different movies that we watch. So when we are understanding that there is this octopus type of thing, the first thing that happens is you go, my God, it's so big that they could do this. It was so big that they could do it, but we've seen it. We're seeing it. It isn't the boogeyman. It's a real thing, and we are seeing it. And what you talk about, Michael, the concept of let's get it put them in front of a court. Before you can do that, you've got to really prepare people for understanding, to come to a realization that people like myself that have been out there for a long time telling you there's a deep state and there's a big problem, we were seeing what was there. We weren't making it up. And I look at this and I say, I think that the fact that this was known, a known solution, the CHLOROQUINE, whatever it is, and that Fauci was up to his neck in this lab over there, I believe that Trump knew all this. I believe he was brought into the picture to orchestrate. Tell us what you want us to do and we'll do it. Because now there isn't a human being on the face of the civilized world that isn't been directly affected in a meaningful way with the concept of somebody orchestrated the complete stoppage of the world. I'm still blown away with the concept that the world stopped.
Yeah.
And so I think that what you're seeing, what you're demanding that happen is going to happen. But before we get there, we've got to go through the process of getting people so absolutely in their face. Look at what these people did. That they can accept it.
Yeah, and I think both things are happening. I mean, what you're saying, if I'm hearing you right, is that, okay, yeah, we need to bring people to justice, but we also need to educate everybody to understand what kind of crimes are being committed on what scale, by corrupt elite. Now, that is what people are talking about, the real purpose behind QAnon, is the wake up, to get enough people ready to, have enough of a popular awareness so that enough people said, hey, the red pill, yeah, it's a shock, but you just feel a lot clearer once you've taken it because you're dealing with the real, right? So to cushion the shock, presumably you get what? 30, 35, 40, you hear different things about nationwide of people who are following Q, who, are hip to the deep state, etc. And then, okay, you got more than 100,000 sealed indictments. Okay, so at what point, if the QAnon thing is for real, isn't a psyop, or maybe it's a good psyop designed to, prepare us all for this, at what point does justice start to roll out? Because until justice does start to roll out, nothing changes. Until impunity ends, nothing changes, because no tyranny in the history of the world has ever voluntarily stopped being tyrannical without punishment.
Well, what would you have us do, Michael? How are you going to have a court case if you don't have the evidence?
Well, wait a minute. What is a sealed indictment if it isn't based on evidence?
It's based on evidence, but the evidence, okay, you've got the evidence that a grand jury would say, yes, I would convict this individual. But how you've got to have enough evidence in front of the humanity, because it's not strictly just 3D reality. It's a spiritual awakening. And if the vast majority of human beings say, it's too big, I just want to survive, I don't want to think about this, then that's the reality that they get. You're trying to wake people up and engage in creating a reality that is a new reality, an alternate reality.
Right, but Nancy, you want to wake people up? You see Hillary Clinton in handcuffs on CNN for child trafficking, and believe me, a whole lot of hundreds of millions of people are suddenly going to be forced swallowing a red pill that wakes them up to the reality of what's going down. Whereas if you and me just having our enlightened conversations here on Radio 5G and all the other good people out there trying to wake people up, while more than 100,000 sealed indictments stay sealed again and again and again. Ooh, I heard about it when it was
Michael, let me tell you something.
Until something happens, nothing happens.
Okay, you can indict. They've indicted Hillary Clinton. They want to see her emails. They want her to have a deposition and tell, we want to talk to you about your emails again. Oh, I'm too big. You can't do that to me. Okay, that's that situation is right now. They're trying to get her into the legal situation. Okay, but she's refusing to do it. She's just disregarding the law. So okay, right. So let's say she does get convicted and is arrested and put in chains and put in report. Don't you think that the 60% of the people are going to say this is bullshit? That Trump has made this all up? It's lies. This is a woman. She's a martyr.
Right. No, I hear you. I believe me. I hear you. And so I am assuming that whatever good guys are hopefully behind this, obviously, have a strategy and a plan around, obviously, Hillary does not get indicted alone, and that it's not just Democrats. If you just indict Democrats and you don't indict all the traffickers on both sides of the aisle, all of the corrupt, paid-off, bribed, blackmailed people on both sides of the aisle, yeah, it's going to be real easy to paint it as just a fascist takeover by that bad guy with the orange hair. So, yeah, I'm not talking about, just focusing on Clinton. Obviously, it's the rumored mass arrests and all the good stuff I've been hearing about since 2011.
They're going to take them down one at a time. They're going to get people, because right now, when they open up the derm, that whole situation with the FICA. That's the first step in really preparing the judicial system to begin to process this whole thing, because the information that they've got concerning that one little thing is enough to get people. You remember when I and you and you probably didn't do it, but I'd say to people, hey, they listen to everything. They know everything about you. Why are you worried about that? They already know. And, oh, no, you're a conspiracy. And then Snowden comes out and he says, NSA knows everything. And then everybody goes, yeah, we knew that.
Right, yeah. They
you want them.
That they've known all along.
You want that.
No, in fact, they were denying it all along.
No, it's not that. It's not that at all. It's this weird thing. It's that rule that when somebody says something that happens to be a fact that isn't accepted, then they're a crackpot. And then after a series of years, all of a sudden, everybody knows this.
Yeah.
But, before you get there, you have to set it up so that people can accept it in little drabs. Because once you set the stage for this, then you want them to say, we know how dirty that is. Oh, and them too. Isn't that interesting? You just can't, because you'd have fighting in the streets, Michael.
I hear you. And it's actually, the work that you and I have been doing here for a year now, where, a year ago, like I said at the start of this program, you and I didn't, we thought it was going to be a pretty big, long uphill battle with 5G, and the movement took off. And, Switzerland has now stopped 5G, and there's municipalities, cities around the U.S. that are putting in moratoriums, et cetera, et cetera. And that in another 3 years, all the people who roll their eyes at us as conspiracy wackos are going to say, oh, the 5G thing. Yeah, the biosphere collapse and tumors and the deep state plot. Yeah, of course, but that's been the way it was. Yeah, it's going to be accepted. It's just be like, and they'll pretend they kind of knew it all along. And they won't even necessarily be pretending. It's just a semi-unconscious process. It's this, how does a paradigm shift occur? I've heard one estimate that when it comes to the mucky mucks who tell you what is what, that paradigm shifts occur at one funeral at a time as younger people come up who, came up through the ranks, grew up with a bigger picture, with more information. They're not stuck in the vested interests of the older, established voices of authority. So yeah, I hear you, and it is a gradual preparation process of popular consciousness. I agree with you on that too, and it's just. I'm just reflecting what I'm sure is the extreme frustration of a lot of folks out there. Especially, all the folks who tune into our good friend David Wilcock, who has the cojones to actually go on his program and say, Easter weekend, 3-day shutdown of the internet, mass arrests, waves of light, get ready, people. Okay, here we are. It's April 22nd. No mass arrests, no shutdown, just dealing with the infection and the shutdown and everything else. So, I don't know. It just felt like this needed to be expressed. I'll grant you it's part of my personal frustration from all, the work I did, on the rule of law. It's got to happen sooner or later, right?
And I just spent, my time trying to find out details of how the narrative is unwinding. I'm giving you evidence that the story is unwinding. I'm giving you evidence that maybe you should stop listening to government officials who are telling you things. You might want to start listening to people that are telling you something that is different. That's, and you don't want to hear it. You want to see it. Well, I'm sorry, darling. It's a slow process to take an entire world and in a matter of a slow process, weeks, convincing them that the reason that you're in your house is because these guys put you there because they don't think you're anything but chattel.
Right. And just to clarify, when you say you don't want to hear it, darling, you're not talking to me, Michael. You mean the general you out there.
Well, no, I was talking to you because, it's like...
I don't think that's fair, Nancy. I don't think it's true either. Come on, give me a break.
You're picking on the fact that they're talking about it happened in Obama. Yes, it's a political world, but to see what's happening behind it, honestly... The deep state is showing its hands all over the place.
Yeah,
it's like spiritually they're being forced to confess. It's like,
yeah. Well, my point wasn't don't demonize Obama or Fauci. My point was, prosecute crimes that they're committed by those guys, but don't pretend that getting them is the answer, because it goes way up the chain. There's there's puppeteers above puppeteers. That was my point.
And we're trying to find out who the puppeteers are and who's the puppets. Let's hope that Fauci is actually the puppeteer. And that, it's one man that caused all this.
Yeah.
But we know better. And we're at the end of the show.
We know something.
Say again?
I said I'm glad we know something, because that's what I'm just trying to focus on. Okay, what can we have in hand that we know? And we're reaching the end of the show here, and we always try to share the upside with people and what we have in hand that can make a difference. So all I can say is use your own discernment, do your own research, and we're all sovereign beings, and the light is winning and will win. Any final word from you, my friend?
It's just unraveling, that's all. Everybody be safe. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening. Bye for now, folks.
Thank you for listening. May it be.
Let it be.